Good afternoon once again from Mena Oceans. Very pleased to welcome Mr. Rami Ghandour, CEO of Metito. Thank you very much for being with us. You are at Mena Oceans. Would you please tell us more about your presence and participation?
Thank you very much, Sal, and for including me in this discussion today. And I was invited here to talk about desalination.
Yes.
And obviously desalination is completely interlinked with what's happening with the oceans. So for me, in one respect, it's been a learning curve to understand the greater picture of what's happening in the oceans. And also, to the extent that I can, sort of contribute my thoughts as to how we can optimize desalination and its interaction with the environment, with the oceans in particular, given the theme of the discussions today, but in the environment as a whole.
Yeah. In terms of policies, we're seeing the GCC getting more aligned with the global policies, notably the European Union and other parts. How do you foresee the water, basically, policies in this part of the world, and how can we basically improve them?
So we're seeing a shift towards a much more commercial arrangement. So if we start with the concept of subsidies, we see that slowly shifting into one where the populations and the industries are paying full cost recovery, which is, I think, very necessary in order to enable an efficient use. You see, desalination is definitely a solution. We would not be living here in this part of the world without desalination. But at the same time, the primary objective should be to be efficient.
Yes.
And we are regrettably...
To reduce emissions as much as possible.
And to reduce consumption.
Yes.
And we are consuming on a per capita basis within the
one
GCC,
of the world's highest.
The highest. It makes no sense. We have the lowest availability of fresh water, yet the highest consumption. So we need a multi-pronged approach.
Yes.
We need to increase supply through desalination, that's clear. We need to reduce consumption. We need to have incentives for people to be efficient in their consumption. We need to look at alternative sources, which includes wastewater reuse, which I think is something that is increasing more and more. And now we are seeing wastewater reuse being implemented across the board, which will reduce the requirement for desalination and other fresh water.
Yeah. In terms of BlueFinance, we know about green finance, but for the first time we're hearing BlueFinance, first time in the region. How do you foresee the BlueFinance basic future in this part of the world?
So obviously I'm going to answer you, Sal, from my perspective, which is out of the private sector. And as an investor into the water and wastewater infrastructure in this part of the world, I think the more access to finance we have, the stronger we can deliver a solution. The more it's catered, whether it's green finance or blue finance, in terms of the funding being linked to the sustainability angles of the projects that are being delivered, the more there is an encouragement for these projects to have a positive impact on the environment. And we see that, and we see more and more private sector engagement where we are able to mobilize private funding and linking it with the different finance sources that are there in order to deliver that.
Are we going to see cross-border projects basically in the GCC, like rail or anything, when it comes to water?
Water is quite difficult to transport.
Yes.
So I think there's enough to be done within each country or within each emirate or within each city or before we look at necessarily a grand cross-border scheme. I have absolutely nothing against the cross-border scheme. But unlike, let's say, power, where you can have a grid and it's very easy to link across a whole large geography, water, you need to find a solution to be locally viable.
Yes. All right. In terms of power, basically, for the desalination, we're seeing, of course, the regular energy. What is next in terms of future? Are you going to try on implementing new methods of power, for example?
That's a very valid question, Sal. The biggest cost in desal and the biggest environmental impact is the power consumption.
Absolutely.
And the great news is the fact that renewable energy in this part of the world has now become competitive.
Yes.
So we have now
including nuclear, so renewable and clean. Today, UAE, 48% of its power comes from clean, a combination of the 4 nuclear reactors plus the solar parks that are operational, and this is increasing up to 70 or 80% in Abu Dhabi, for example.
You're absolutely right. And we've had the pleasure and honor of...
How would that impact the desalination sector?
So we have delivered the first 2 solar-powered desalination plants in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
One is in King Abdullah Economic City, and one is the current water supply to the city of Neom.
Yes.
At this point. Both of these plants are partially solar-powered, directly. The desal plants, at the end of the day, are typically agnostic to the power source.
Yes.
So in a way, we can decouple the discussion on optimizing the renewable power, and as that becomes more and more efficient, and especially, like certain renewable powers, let's say like solar, are not 24 hours a day, so then you need to talk about interlinking different types of renewable powers. You mentioned nuclear, or you need to look at storage, and as all of that improves and more comes online, you naturally end up with a better solution for the desalination.
So do you foresee that you will be taking part or taking renewable or nuclear energy from the grid?
Absolutely. So we will take the energy that's available, but the good news again is that as we look at something to be long-term viable, it has to make economic sense.
Yes.
And the good news is that the renewable power is now at a stage where it is quite often more competitive than conventional power.
Yeah.
And as a result, you naturally end up with that conclusion.
Yeah. We're seeing lots of your projects, or some of your projects abroad, in Central Asia and also in Serbia, if I'm not mistaken. Why is that, if I may ask, for example? Why are you diversifying your offering while the market in the Middle East or the GCC remains still not
we are
saturated?
We are a global emerging markets water player.
Okay.
So you mentioned, for example, Serbia. Serbia, we have currently the first public-private partnership wastewater project.
Absolutely.
Serbia wants to enter the EU.
Yes.
And the largest impediment to entry is the environmental standards, which they're not meeting. So
the criteria.
My understanding is that they need to implement 32 wastewater plants in order to comply with the EU environmental standards.
Correct.
So this is the first of many
All right.
that are required there. Similarly, in Central Asia, again, there's a huge requirement. We have the first PPP wastewater in Central Asia, in a city called Namangan in Uzbekistan.
Yes.
We are also looking at completely retrofitting and modernizing the irrigation pumps. The irrigation pumps today use 16% of the total country's power consumption.
Absolutely.
Irrigation pumps.
Absolutely.
And these pumps, most of them were installed in the Soviet era.
Yes.
In the 70s and 80s.
Yes.
By replacing them with new pumps, you can halve the power consumption.
Yes.
So you have an opportunity to save 8% of the total country's power in Uzbekistan.
And my last question, as you know, His Excellency Abdullah bin Tok, the Minister of Economy, is keen to have or revealed UAE's strategy to be among the world's top food producers to strengthen the national food security, especially post-COVID. Well, it might sound a bit strange for a country like the UAE, but as you know, the Netherlands, which is a small country relatively, is among the top 4 world producers. So everything is possible for the UAE. Are you ready? Are we ready in the UAE in terms of water supply to cope with this demand for agriculture?
A lot of it comes on agriculture to how you are efficient.
Yes.
With agriculture.
But still,
because you need to have the right choice of crops.
Yes.
And you take the decisions of what crops you plant based on the water consumption.
Correct.
So what you don't want to go is put a very high consumption. Also, from a food security point of view, you see the UAE and other GCC countries also investing into land in countries that are water rich.
Yes.
So I think there's an important balance to be made, and as we look at food production within the UAE, from a water angle, I would strongly say that the important deciding factor should be looking at how do you have efficient irrigation and efficient choice of crops for that.
Rami, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Sam.